Well, I'm happy to say that I am bringing you good news. The nut of all nuts has seemingly been cracked. Energy from fusion is coming online, maybe in our lifetime, maybe in the next 20 years, if not tomorrow. We can create bounteous energy for the grid, for electric vehicles, electric trains, space travel, who knows, and more, through nuclear fusion without creating radioactive waste and by avoiding the costly and dirty fossil fuels that have been the backbone of industrial civilization for the last 100 years. I'm not joking. This story has been picked up, but I don't think it's been given the fanfare that it deserves. It was first reported in the Financial Times, and I will just read a little bit of this just to get you up to speed. This reads like science fiction, to be honest, or a young adult fantasy novel. Fusion energy breakthrough by U.S. scientists boost clean power hopes, by Tom Wilson. U.S. government scientists have made a breakthrough in the pursuit of limitless zero-carbon power by achieving a net energy gain in a fusion reaction for the first time, according to 3 people with knowledge of preliminary results from a recent experiment. Physicists have since the 1950s sought to harness the fusion reaction that powers the sun, but no group has been able to produce more energy from the reaction than it consumes, a milestone known as net energy gain or target gain, which would help prove the process could provide a reliable, abundant alternative to fossil fuels and conventional nuclear energy. As an aside, nuclear energy operates through fission, that is the splitting of the atom. The federal Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, which uses a process called inertial confinement fusion that involves bombarding a tiny pellet of hydrogen plasma with the world's biggest laser, had achieved net energy gain in a fusion experiment in the past 2 weeks, the people said. The fact that this includes the world's biggest laser is really the cherry on top of the sundae. This is an amazing story, and I am very happy. In fact, news like this almost kind of reverses many of the trajectories that I see for Western civilization. It's worth revisiting this notion called a Kardashev scale. And this is something that Carl Sagan spoke about. Others have as well. And it's basically, it came from a Soviet scientist in the 1960s. This was a very, very big picture idea. And it described 3 levels of civilization. So level 1 in the original scale, it's been modified, but I'll stick with the original. All the energy that reaches the planet from the sun is being harnessed or consumed. Kardashev is basically measuring a civilization through the energy that it's consumed. Now you could say, well, that's not really what civilization is about. Civilization is about art and intelligence and culture. And of course, that's correct. But at least in the industrial age, we can measure a civilization in terms of how much work is being done. Now, what the value of that work is not a question that can be answered. That is a value question that science, in a way, can't answer. But it definitely does offer a good, rule of thumb type measure for where we are as a civilization. Whatever debates we might have, certainly if energy consumption began to drop by 10% a year, and we were, the world was going dark and so on, I think everyone could agree that civilization was declining. Now, it is interesting. We have not officially reach stage one. Stage one would be harnessing all of the energy from the sun that is reaching the planet. Now, on some level, all civilization, even hunter-gatherer civilization, if you want to call it civilization, is an attempt to do this. It is an attempt to harness the energy given off by the sun, whether through gathering berries that grow through sunlight and photosynthesis, whether it is hunting antelope that are also, on some root level based on the energy input from the sun. But then you can take that up. That would include, developing fossil fuels, which is, of course, from the dinosaurs, but are ultimately based on the sun. It might include solar power itself, directly, immediately harnessing it, and other things like that. That would be a stage one civilization, and we actually haven't quite reached that. Now, a stage two civilization, in this almost ridiculously big picture outlook, is capturing or harnessing the energy radiating from a planet's home star. So this would be like creating a megastructure around the sun, a massive series of solar panels where we are more or less taking all of that energy. Again, for what? We can't say. But with that amount of energy, you could certainly imagine interstellar travel and so on. And then, not to be outdone, Kardashev really takes it to the limit and talks about a level 3 civilization. This includes harnessing all of the energy of a galaxy. And when I hear something like this, I'm almost imagining the creatures or entities in Arthur C. Clarke's book, 2001, and that are more mysteriously depicted in Stanley Kubrick's movie, 2001. This, intergalactic organism that can seed intelligence in unknown planets and that can make plans on the time scale of millions of years. Just really something else. Now, let me talk a little bit about the implications, kind of more immediate implications. This news has just hit, and we should be cautiously optimistic or skeptically hopeful about what can happen here. I don't think the government is lying. I don't think this is propaganda or anything. I don't think they would have done that unless this potential is real. That being said, you're bombarding a pallet of hydrogen plasma with a giant laser. We don't know how this can be made pragmatically useful, or needless to say, be commercialized or nationalized or anything like that. Are we going to be able to harness this power in the next decade, in the next 25 years? Is this gonna? It's taken us about 50 years of laboratory work trying to get to a net profit energy in the laboratory. Is it going to take us another 50 years where we can fuel a grid through the fusion process? I don't know. Again, this does fill me with optimism, but it's cautious. But keep in mind that markets are forward projecting mechanisms. That is, you are not buying a stock, for instance, due to its great performance in the past or how this has been a great company for the last 50 years and you just want to own a bit of it. That's nostalgia. Markets are always going forward. The question is, what is this company going to be in the future, and thus can you sell it to someone at a profit? So markets are forward looking. And I don't know if anything has been affected by this news because this is very early, but you could certainly imagine markets for fossil fuel companies and the like beginning to tank on this news. Now, I don't think it would happen that quickly. But as this is developed and as there's a kind of timeline for the commercial, industrial, just practical application of this, I could see that happening. There could be a run out of energy stocks, conventional fossil fuel energy stocks, in the sense of we're not going to care about this stuff anymore. We're moving on. We're going to fuel the grid through fusion. We're going to drive electric cars in the future that can be powered on the grid. And, with a mere glass of water, you could fund 1 million electric cars for 100 years or something like that. This could be an extremely remarkable thing. Now, another political implication that I think is going to come from this is that if this is something very real, then there are going to be political forces funded by entities in the Middle East that are going to try to talk everyone out of this. Because needless to say, this reduces the power of the Middle East to a tremendous extent. Some 50% of the world's oil reserves, and I think around a third of natural gas, is in the Middle East, a ultimately small area on the globe that is immensely important. And there are going to be clear geopolitical implications to fusion if it is practical. I don't think getting our hands on oil was the sole reason for, say, the invasion of Iraq or our United States' continued interest in the Middle East. I think there are other factors at play. There's Israel and its perceived enemies. There are other things. And we didn't just go in and conquer and take the oil. It was done through other mechanisms. But again, I'll grant you that the presence of oil makes someone like Saddam Hussein much more important and potentially dangerous to the U.S. empire than someone out in a resource-depleted place that we don't care that much about because he couldn't, so to speak, turn off the oil tap at any point. I was thinking about this. I wonder if there are going to even be religious implications to the ending of the Middle East as a place of importance. I think with Christian Zionism, American foreign policy, and just the endless chaos and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, all of that tension and drama almost added to the religiosity of Christian Zionist. The Middle East and Jerusalem and the birthplace of their religion, it's also in the news. And so you can kind of understand why they would have apocalyptic fantasies about the Middle East. If this changes and the Middle East becomes a backwater and we simply don't care about Qatar or Saudi Arabia and the like, and we just simply move off it, I personally think that would be an amazing thing. But I do think it would obviously affect geopolitics, but I think it might also affect Christianity in some profound way. Just a thought. We could also discuss how something like fusion could be the beginning of a new civilization, or it could be the end of civilization. Now, I'll give you the hopeful view first. We spend so much of our lives running around, working hard, fretting, pulling our hair out, just to basically survive, just to keep going, just to make sure that we can put enough food on the table or fill up our tank with gas or have enough money to fly on a plane or go on a train and so on. We put so much into the very basics, and the rest of it is, the icing on the cake. Do you want to go on vacation? Do you want to have, buy a fancy dress or whatever? It's something offered in addition to our basic living standards. And if you just imagine